Welcome back to my series on chess opening theory. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the move 7 f4 sideline in the mainline Winawer variation of the French defense. So the French defense is when we have the moves e4, e6, d4, d5, and the Winawer is when white now plays knight to c3 and black plays bishop to b4. And the main line continues with moves e5, c5, a3, bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop, and now knights to e7. And today we will be looking at the move f4. Now, f4, it seems like a fairly natural move on the surface, but in reality it's not so good. Like, strong players, they generally will not play f4, they will generally play h4 instead. And the reason why is because, while it does look like, this move might be useful for doing, sort of a kingside pawn storm, like pushing the pawns on the kingside, right? In reality, white should be playing h4, h5 first, because if white is going to make a break here, white, would be playing pawn to f5, but white can't immediately do that without first playing, pawn to g4. But if white plays pawn to g4, then black will play pawn to h5, sort of challenging, all this before f5 even happens. Not only that, but another issue with pawn to f4 is that it actually kind of makes white's dark square bishop a little bit worse. It kind of gets in its way. It blocks the bishop from coverage of the h6 square in particular. So if, like, white plays g4 and black throws the h5 pawn forward and white takes, the bishop will not be, covering the h6 square, so white wouldn't really have ideas of playing, like, pawn to h6 with the idea of forcing the g pawn to take. Black could, in theory, take with the rook, especially if black has put their knight on f5 to stop the pawn, like the f pawn, from going forward. So overall, this line, it's much more commonly seen at amateur level. You don't really see titled players playing it that much because it's kind of going about things the wrong way. And so anyway, there are a number of ways that black can play against this line, like knight b c6 is fairly common, but I like the other main move, which is queen to a5. It's just much more forcing, much more combative or challenging, like you're kind of forcing white to react to this threat of queen takes c3. It's a pretty annoying move. And, generally white will play either bishop to d2 or queen to d2. Bishop to b2 would be very silly because the bishop would be blocking this file for the rook. And, the bishop would just be staring at a bunch of its own pawns. It would just kind of be a tall pawn. So, generally here, white will play bishop to d2. But if white does play queen to d2, I mean, this can happen. It has been played before. Black can go for this typical idea of b6 with the bishop a6 trade. And if white now plays c4, which I think is the engine's recommendation, black can just trade over here and then take the d4 pawn and try to hold on to this guy. Black will not succeed in holding on to this pawn, but black can kind of try just to, improve black's own pieces anyway, like knight f3, knight c6. Like, knight c6 is a move you want to do anyway. And if white plays bishop b5 to pin the knight and regain the pawn, bishop d7, bishop takes knight, bishop takes, knight takes pawn. Like, this position here is totally fine for black. Black is doing well. In fact, black has kind of solved the problem of their bishop. White's pawn structure is not looking so great over here. And also, white's bishop seems a little bit unhappy, whereas black's knight on d5, it's a pretty happy knight. Right, though it will probably get kicked away with pawn to c4 at some point. Alright, so as a result, white might not want to go for this. Instead, in this position, another move which has been played, is d takes c5, basically taking the pawn on c5 before black can, play c takes d4 if white were to play, c4, queen trade, all that stuff we just saw. A very cool idea here for black is to actually give up a pawn, like kind of do a positional pawn sacrifice with the move bishop to a6. If white plays c takes b6, it's important to note that bishop takes f1 here would actually be a very bad idea. If you want, you can pause the video and try to figure out why bishop takes f1 is actually losing. I will reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. It's because of a very typical idea, pawn to b7. Basically, this pawn is going to promote, and it's also going to win this rook. Black has no way of stopping that. Instead, the point is not to mess up white's castling, it's just to open up a bunch of lines here. Like, we can take back like this, and sure, this pawn might be a little bit weak, since it's isolated, but all of these pawns are weak. Like white's extra pawn is one of these guys, and basically black has kind of developed their rook for free in a manner of speaking, and basically black has a lot of open lines. Like, black can just castle, bring the other rook over here, and just keep applying pressure and just have a fine position. Like, overall, this is very decent for black. Even though black's down a pawn, black has plenty of compensation, and black is going to solve the problem of the dark square bishop. It kind of reminds me of a Benko gambit, where you just sacrifice a pawn in order to get some very nice activity for your pieces. But this is all if white plays queen to d2 here. If instead white goes for the much more normal bishop to d2, which is what happened in the game that we're looking at today, then black can just continue with their typical plan. Play knight bc6, apply some more pressure over here. It's important to note that if white plays pawn to c4, we can just put the queen on a4. Maybe white can take this guy, but we can take that guy. And overall, we're kind of breaking through on the center. And, white's king isn't looking too happy, given that the f-pawn has kind of weakened these diagonals by being pushed. And also, white's dark square bishop isn't too happy. Like, this f-pawn push, it's kind of been more of a curse than a blessing. But anyway, this is if white were to play pawn to c4 now. So that's why we don't worry about that. Instead, what happened in the game today is white played knight to f3, and then black can continue with either pawn to c4 or queen to a4. Both of these moves are fine. Grandmaster Giri recommends pawn to c4, and he gives a very interesting theoretical line where if white now plays pawn to a4 to stop black from doing it, you can just continue with bishop d7, bishop e2, you can castle queenside. And if now white tries to push the h-pawn on the king side, if white tries to continue with this, then we can go with knight to f5. Recall that pawn to g4, if that came first, could be met with pawn to h5 of our own. If white tries pawn to h5 now, then black is just in time to play pawn to f6 and just break through over here. It's important to note that pawn to g4 will just be met by knight to g3. And basically, if white tries it earlier, I thought I should show this line. So if instead of just one subtle little nuance here is that the point of knight g3 isn't actually to trade for this bishop, rather it's to trade for this bishop, because generally in the Winawer, black is very, very strong on the light squares. Like, black has all of these, nice light square resources, but has problems on the dark squares. So that's why you want to go get this guy as opposed to grabbing that guy. Just thought I would mention that really quick. But this is not what happened in the game. Instead, after pawn to c4 in this position, We had bishop to e2, bishop to d7, you know, similar stuff. White now decided to castle kingside, and black decided to castle queenside. Like, the engine prefers queen a4 first, you know, just stopping white from playing pawn to a4. But castling queenside, it's not a bad move by any means. It just might be slightly inaccurate. And before continuing, I thought I should just introduce the players. So with the white pieces, we have Ante Maras, who is the player who is rated about 2100. And with the black pieces, we have FIDE Master Tony Petrusic. Hopefully I'm pronouncing all those names correctly. And I couldn't find much information about the players, although I do know that black is a coach on Lichess, so I'll definitely be providing a link to black's coaching page. And this particular game took place at a tournament in Croatia, and that's about all I know. But you know, like, there were other games to look at, but there weren't a whole lot featuring titled players because this line, it's much more commonly played among amateurs. And so anyway, what information I was able to find is in the video description. Now back to the game. So we now have opposite side castling. That means that the players are very likely going to try to attack each other. Like, black's probably going to strike on the king side while white strikes on the queen side. But it's actually very difficult for white to strike on the queen side just because black can kind of just play like pawn to b6 and then knight to a5 at some point and essentially just kind of shut everything down. Like, this pawn will not be able to break over here if the knight sits over here. And basically nothing is really going to be able to sacrifice on b6 aside from maybe a rook. But, you know, that's a pretty significant sacrifice. So overall, I much prefer black's chances here over white's when it comes to attacking each other's kings and stuff. Like, basically, black just needs to make a break on the king side at some point with, you know, some pawn pushes. And we're going to see one very soon. So white played queen to b1. And I forget the reason for this move. It might have just been to kind of free things up, or maybe just put the queen on b2, stuff like that. I don't know. Black plays pawn to f6. White now plays queen to b2. Black here played pawn to b6, which the engine doesn't like as much. Engine prefers bishop to e8. I kind of feel that pawn to b6 might have been a little bit premature, since the queen, if you're not going to put it on a4, can probably just come back and then play b6 and then knight a5, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, white might have had other plans for this game. We have bishop to e1, kind of doing some rerouting and stuff. Black plays knight to f5. With some ideas of maybe infiltrating like this, so pawn to g4 is not really possible right now, since that would actually just lose that pawn. White now reroutes to f2, kind of stopping any knight e3 ideas. So black plays pawn to h5, stopping any pawn to g4 ideas. We have knight to h4, challenging the knight. Black's like, I'm going to, you know, support my knight with another knight. And now white decided to take on f6, and black took back. I'm a bit unsure if that pawn trade was actually all that good, because I kind of feel that black can do much more with an open file here than white can. But anyway, white now played queen to b4, offering a queen trade. And black's like, okay, maybe, but I'm not going to double my pawns in the process. You know, I much prefer to get my bishop here where it'll apply some pressure. So we have queen b4, queen a4, knight takes f5, knight takes f5, and now queen goes back to b2. A little bit silly. Like, all of these queen moves, they feel like just a waste of time. Like, chess is a game of tempo. It's very important that you don't waste moves without a very good reason, because if you do waste moves, your opponent is going to get much further ahead in their plan than you are going to get in your own plan. So anyway, we have rook dg8, rook a to b1, rook to g6, maybe getting ready to put something on, put something on this file, like to support the rook from behind. We have to watch for this pawn, of course. Bishop is hitting it. So we have king to h1. We push the pawn. Queen to c1. Starting to bring the queen back. Bishop to f3. Good square for the bishop. It's on this diagonal where it can do some stuff. And it's also defending this guy, so I like that. Queen to d6. Applying a bit of pressure over here and getting the queen off of this diagonal. Maybe the queen's going to come back to one of these squares as well. That's another possibility. Queen to d2. Queen to f8. Rook fe1. Queen to g7. Pawn to h3, because black was probably ready to play h3, as there might have been possibilities of sacrificing something on g3. In fact, maybe even sacrificing a rook. Nah, a rook would be too much. That's just sacking the knight, most likely. So anyway, we have pawn to h3. Black moves their other rook onto the g file. It doesn't need to worry about this anymore, since, of course, if bishop comes here, then the rook will just blast through like that. So we have rook to g1, because black is looking at this potential weakness with, nasty intentions. Black plays queen to h7, probably to free up the, free up the knight to maybe do something, or stuff like that. Also, maybe getting the queen on the same file with the king. Lots of different possibilities. We have bishop to e3. Now black kind of improves their king a little, adding a bit more defense to this, as white might try blasting through over here. We have rook be1, rook 8 g7, king to h2. Lots of maneuvering this game. Players are still kind of figuring out how they want to go about winning this, or what their plan is going to be. We have bishop to f2, queen to g8. Generally, in batteries, you usually do want your queen to be at the back, or at the very least not at the front, because very often the thing at the front will be, what you sacrifice or what you trade. So you usually aren't going to be sacrificing your queen. Anyway, we have rook to a1. The players are still, trying to figure out what to do. Bishop to c6. We have rook a to e1. King to b7. White might look at this thing, but the queen on g8 is defending it. Queen to e2, adding another attacker to this guy. We have rook to e7. Bishop to g4. White's trying to do something. White's trying to get at this thing over here. But now black plays knight to g3. Very cool place for the knight to be. It might be jumping to over here, where it'll just kind of ruin white's day when it comes to all this plan of attacking this thing. White can't currently take this thing. Well, I suppose maybe white could, but knight takes, and then the knight will be maybe hitting this rook. Although, let's see. Actually, that's an interesting line, come to think of it. I didn't consider that line. Let's see. Yeah, what would happen if white were to try that? Let's see, what does the engine say about that? Yeah, you can take here. I was a bit worried about this guy hitting that at the end, though. So bishop takes. And then rook takes. Ah, I see. The knight is still defended, so white would just be down a piece there. That's good to see. So here, in this position, white is not doing too well anymore. Like, it looked like white might have been okay for a bit, but basically this knight is going to arrive on e4, where it will be very strong. black is even okay with giving up this pawn, because if white takes it, the h file comes open, and black can probably, that'll help black with their attack. So white, of course, wants to stop the knight from coming to e4, because that would just be a nasty knight that applies a lot of pressure to everything. For one thing, if white were to take the pawn on h4, black could probably take the pawn on c3, and material count would be even. So in this position, white now played bishop takes g3, and this is not so good. This is quite bad, but it's a very understandable mistake. It's very understandable why white did this, but this actually loses material. If you want, you can pause the video and try to figure out, why is this bad? Why does this move, bishop takes g3, lose material? If you want, you can kind of calculate all the lines. I will reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. So there are basically two main lines to consider here. Like, black should, of course, just take back with the pawn. So the first line to look at is just, what if white were to take this pawn? It looks like a free pawn, but it's not, because black has this move, winning the bishop because of the pin. So that, of course, is no good. So what happened in the game instead is white played king to h1. The engine doesn't like this because of what black's next move was. Black's next move was to take this free bishop, and it is a free bishop, because if white takes back with the queen, like taking back with the pawn is a similar problem. We take, and then, oopsie doopsies. And so that is why that loses material. So basically, black has gone up a bishop over here, and so white's going to try to hang in here. White plays rook gf1, and to maybe allow the possibility of taking this now, but white is too late. The rook moves away. We have king to g1, pawn to e5. If black is up material, black is very happy to just open everything up, even if that means throwing away a pawn, because black knows that, they will be able to win this game if they're able to simplify and trade things off. So we have pawn to e5, pawn to a4. White does not go for opening up the position. So we now have pawn to e4 over here. Pawn to a5, white tries to open up the queen side, but black says no. White insists, and black's like, nope, I'm not even going to take this pawn. And so white plays queen d1. Black plays rook e h7, getting ready for some nastiness over here. We have queen to c1, queen to h8, adding even more, reinforcements. We have queen to a3. The engine doesn't like this, but honestly, it's very hard for white to defend here. We have rook takes h3, pawn takes, rook takes, and black's attack is just unbelievably strong. And black's attack is even better because black's not even really down any material. Black has kind of given up their rook for 2 pawns, but black was already up a bishop. So really, material count is fine, but white's king is very, very unsafe. So the game continued, or it concluded, I should say, with the moves queen to e7 check. Black played bishop to d7, and it was in this position that white now resigned, because black is more or less threatening mate. It's like, basically, this pawn covering this square is fairly important here. This rook's going to come in at some point. King comes up like that, and then queen here would be mate. And if white instead tries like moving the king up like this, and you do the rook like that, and then the king is forced either to go back, in which case we just do original plan, or the king takes this, and then the queen just lands here, and that is mate as well. So it makes sense that for white to resign here, as white is just going to run out of checks. Like, for example, if white were to try queen to c5 with check, and black can just go king to, probably to b8, I think. Let's see. So b8, that's, yeah, b8 doesn't quite work because queen to d6. I have to think of it. Yeah, queen here. Maybe just something simple like bishop to bishop block. Although there is queen to there, so that's actually kind of interesting. Let's think about this for a moment. It's fun to analyze that kind of stuff. Queen to c5 check. Probably just king d8. Yeah, king d8. There are no more checks. Pawn on here. Yeah, it will just be queen here, king here. Here, this is not what happened in the game, but basically black's goal now is just to ensure that there are no more checks. And yeah, there will be nothing left here. Here, black is completely safe because this square is covered. There are no checks along this diagonal, and there's no way to stop this mating attack. Anyway, hope that you enjoyed the game. And this will be the last of the move 7 sidelines. There is one important sideline on move 8, and then after that, I might be done with the French for the time being. I don't know. There's some stuff on move 10 as well. I'm kind of debating how deep I want to go. But anyway, if you like this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye for now.